The very few parts or tenets of religion that is as powerful and as decisive as the afterlife. Almost every religion has claimed or has claims about what happens in the afterlife. They have claims about places we would go in the afterlife and places we would not go. What would happen to us when we get to those places? Are there any evidence for it? Of course not. Zero evidence. Save some visions by some select dubious individuals. Personally, I have always been very curious about heaven and hell. As a child, heaven and hell were introduced to me as you know, as a moral tool to gauge and guide my morality to the path of Christendom and Christianity. I was told if I do bad things, I would go to hell, and if I did good things, I would go to heaven. And obviously, upon growing up, I've done my own research and I have been fascinated with the phenomenon of heaven and hell. When I was a believer, I did believe one or two visions that as potentially being true, and yes, why wouldn't God send, visions to preachers and to select group of special people to come and decipher that to the world when I was much younger. But I still couldn't shake off how I really felt about heaven and hell. I mentioned earlier in my Bible podcast on how I viewed Christians, especially the more religious Christians, and one of the things that I took notice of was the idea of heaven and hell, and who would make it to the heaven and the hell, as per Christian dogma. Believe it or not, I have always been iffy about the idea of going to a Christian heaven. It did not excite me. It bored and frankly scared me. I was never interested in a Christian heaven. I always felt it would be a gathering of terrible people. I would never enjoy their company in real life. Looking closely at at some of the antics of religious people, and this also reflects in data. The more religious a country is, the farther away they adhere or farther away they respect human rights and differences in culture of alien cultures, or differences in alien ideologies, different ideologies. And that is very true. The more religious you are, the more, for lack of a better word, blockheaded you are in terms of looking at other perspectives or challenging your own deeply held views. So, to me, I felt, okay, who would be in heaven and who would be in hell? First of all, I always struggled with how accurate God's judgment was going to be, especially after reading the Bible and looking at how he dealt with Lot and how he dealt with some of his enemies, and how flippantly he gave out instructions to perform genocide. I was always petrified as to how accurate would God's judgment be. And not just accurate as to how his judgment would be, but would he get it wrong? And what if he gets it wrong? How can I correct it? That was number one. Number two, I hated the fact that the only options we had were Christian heaven and Christian hell. And from my interactions with religious Christians, I realized I did not like this group. And it wasn't because they were Christian, but because they were fundamentalists. And this was when I was a child. As an adult, looking back, I realized I would not like fundamentalism manifested and displayed in any religious sense, irrespective of the denomination, irrespective of the religious grouping. It wasn't my thing. I was almost always a skeptic for as long as I can remember, and it has been a part of my cognitive design. Heaven and hell was one of such things. So Christians were a problem for me. I felt I was going to have a problem if I was to congregate with this mindset and people who had this strong Christian mindset. I did not want to spend eternity with them. The second thing were the activities we were going to do in heaven when we get there. I was not blindly fascinated with eternal life. I wanted to know what exactly, what activities would take up my time for all eternity. For Christians, there was a lot of singing, giving thanks, and praising God. I found that to be fucking tedious. I never found that interesting, and I do not want that. I found it to be intellectually boring to congregate and give thanks for all eternity. That was fucking stupid. I hated that notion. I never wanted to partake in that. I was like, what else? What else are we going to do in heaven? We'll fly around and speak to each other. That made no sense. That's exactly what we're doing here. And then the features of heaven I found shocking. No diseases, no sicknesses. So this was a problem. I felt if God understood that there was something wrong with sicknesses or diseases, why did He create it on earth? Only for us to strive to enjoy it in heaven? Okay, so what about people who did not get sick on earth? People who were born rich and have lived a rich life? What would heaven do for them? I found that fucking fascinating. Even the design of heaven, I was very curious about it, and I was not interested in. The city was of pure gold, as John described it in Revelation 21:21. The great streets of the city was of pure gold, like transparent glass. Streets of gold? Oh, God. That was so fucking tacky. It was so fucking tacky. Rivers, in different religions we have different, rivers of wine, or of overflowing rivers. I found that to be very boring, and I never understood why that would be interesting. Why would people want this for all eternity? I felt there had to be so much more. That this cannot be what excites people. Praise the Lord, live forever in bliss. The idea of bliss scared me. Everyone gets a mansion, streets of gold. That sounded very tacky to me. One thing, when I look back now, one thing I understand, or one thing I've understood was why that did not excite me. Was I wanted more intellectual, like more activity. I wanted to be engaged, and I did not see how praising a deity for all time, lazing about, was a effective use of eternity. I do not understand that. That made no sense. And the description of hell was just the worst. Fire, eternal fire, eternal fire burning your skin for all eternity, never quenching fire, and you still will be tormented by demons, all for not following a specific group's teaching of what good and evil was. This I found to be scary. As a child, when I believed in it, I found it scary. I was afraid of how God would judge. What if He made a mistake? And what if you're sorry after going to hell? And I felt there must be a way for everyone to be allowed to redeem themselves. It was so definitive. I felt so. Let's say you've been bad for 5 years and you die. Does that warrant an eternity of pain? These were some of the questions that boggled my mind. There is nothing fascinating about heaven or hell, or why I would want to partake in that malarkey. If I was going to be, one I would have suggested would have been a better deal was, we all get to be gods when we die. We're all given dimensions. We're all allowed to build and design our own galaxies, our own solar system, our own life, like a simulation. That would be a better sell. Plus, the people that were going to heaven were not appealing to me. I felt, I mentioned that earlier. They were intellectually boring to me. I never felt any of the strong intellects who I read about. None of my mentors, some of which were homosexuals, for example, they wouldn't make it to heaven. What about my good friends who were from other religions? My Muslim friends, my Buddhist friends, my Hindu friends, my agnostic friends. What about my friends from other denominations? These were the people I wanted to spend eternity with, not fundamentalist Christians. This really scared me. I felt my favorite writers, authors, scientists, philosophers, engineers, economists, artists will not make it to heaven. I enjoy music, for example, and I enjoy so many genres of music in which art is free free in its description and free in saying whatever they want to say or depicting whatever art form to showcase that art. A lot of it might be a tad skewed. A lot of it might be challenging to religious doctrine. I was fascinated with what would happen to these people. Where would they go? And because I found them fascinating, I would want to go where they would want to go. I want to go where AC/DC is going, where Jimi Hendrix was. I wanted to go where Little Richard was. I wanted to go where Bernard Russell was. I wanted to go where Baldwin was. I wanted to go where Confucius was. I wanted to, these were the guys that fascinated me. I wanted to go where Siddhartha went. If they didn't make it to heaven, why would I want to go there? Albert Einstein, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Why would I not want to go where they're going? Michael Jackson, Metallica, Fela Kuti, Miles Davis. When I looked at certain people and how they lead their lives that were not particularly Christian, I was always fascinated, where would they go? Grace Jones. I remember I loved Grace Jones as growing up as a child. I was worried, where would she go? What happens then? What about people who challenged the way of life? Kant, Humes, Berkeley, Descartes. Where would they go? Mill, Hegel, Humes, Plato, fucking Plato, Plotinus. Where the fuck would they go? Like, seriously, this shit scared me. The Jackson 5. And it blighted. As a child, this shit freaked me out. I was always curious as to where these people would go, people that I found fascinating. Where would they go? Stephen Hawking, where would they go? And then I found I had a fascination for philosophers, especially those that challenged, deeply held beliefs. I was very fascinated about, as to where they would go. My good Muslim friends, where would they go? Heaven never appealed to me. It was such a joke of a place. It was a place I felt would not have the people I wanted to be around. The idea for it was weak. The philosophical ideas for it was weak. The intellectual arguments for it were soft. Plus the, architectural design was tacky. I mean, I can liberate your place up, but please, gold streets. That was terrible. I don't know. Perhaps you have a better argument as to why I would want to go to a Christian heaven, or why I would be afraid, or why I would see any reason to believe in this. Fascinating, I tell you.